So that's for the right, or for the liberal center, while for the left, the only true alternative is the one between itself and the liberal mainstream, while the populist radical right is nothing but the symptom of the liberalism's inability to deal with the leftist threat. So when we hear today a politician or an ideologist offering us a choice between liberal freedom and fundamentalist oppression and triumphantly asking us this rhetorical question, but do you want women to be excluded from public life? Do you want every criticism or making fun of religion to be punished by death and so on? What should make us suspicious is the very self-evidence of the answer. Of course, we don't want this. The problem is that such simplistic liberal universalism long ago lost its innocence. This is why, for a true leftist, the conflict between liberal permissiveness and fundamentalism is ultimately a false conflict. The two opposites form a vicious cycle of two poles presupposing generating each other. One should accomplish here a Hegelian step back and put in question the very measure from which fundamentalism appears in all its horror. What Horkheimer of Frankfurt School had said long ago should also be applied to today's fundamentalism. He said, as you know, that those who don't want to talk about fascism should also keep silent that those who don't want to talk critically about capitalism should also keep silent about fascism. We should repeat this today. Those who do not want to talk critically about liberal democracy and its noble principles should also keep quiet about religious fundamentalism. How then, so this is my point, and now just if you permit me a provocative conclusion, my point is that the ABC, and this is connected to what Badiou was developing yesterday as this para-consistency and so on, that we are caught in a certain antagonism that imposes itself as the principal antagonism today, the Free West against fundamentalism. The first thing to do is to render problematic this antagonism itself, to perceive it as a false antagonism, in the sense of, although I agree, sometimes strategically we should support liberals here and there, but basically we should see that this is a false struggle. That, to cut a long story short, that in fighting fundamentalism, liberalism is not fighting its opponent, it's fighting its own outgrowth. That the only thing that can save what is worth saving, liberalism itself, is a more radical left. Now, just look, empirical proof. I'm close to the end. What are the consequences of this? Now I will try to conclude with a little bit more unpleasant consequence. I will try to present you with a clear empirical example of how this step out of the two of the false opposition to see beneath the false opposition the true opposition. Let me begin with, you will think it has nothing to do with what I was talking. It is directly linked. Do you know what is the third wave? No, nothing to do with those futurists. We are entering a new era. It's not 2012, we will all die, but humanity will be reborn. No, it is the social experiment made by a history teacher called Ron Jones at Caberly High School in Palo Alto, California in 1967. Is this standard liberal experiment? And again, this was a triumph. He wrote later a book. Then it was made a TV movie. It was even recently, I think, made a version in Germany here. I radically disagree with this experiment. Why? What did he do? In order to explain to his students how the German populace could claim ignorance of the Holocaust, you know, this eternal question, how could big, good Germans do what they did? Jones started in his class a movement, he called it the Third Way, and convinced his students that the movement is meant to eliminate democracy. He emphasized this main point of the movement in its motto. strength through discipline, strength through community, strength through action, strength through pride. On the fourth day, however, Jones decided to terminate the experiment which was slipping out of his control. He discovered that students became increasingly involved in the project, and their discipline and loyalty were becoming breathtaking. Like some of them even denounced to Jones their peers whom they suspected of not really believing in the projects and so on and so on. So Jones ordered students on the fourth day to attend a rally at noon next day, where instead of a televised address of their leader, the students were confronted by an empty screen, and then after a couple of minutes of waiting, Jones announced that they have been part of an experiment in fascism and that they all willingly created a sense of discipline superiority which German citizens displayed in the period of Nazi Germany. I think this is a liberal fake, a false, lying experiment. Why? As expected, liberals were fascinated by the third way, discerning in it the deep Lord of the Flies, I'm referring to William Golding's novel, insight into how, liberals like this topic. Beneath the civilized surface, we are all potentially fascist beasts. The barbarian beast is lurking in all of us, awaiting its opportunity. But what if we shift the perspective a little bit and conceive the authoritarian personality as the repressed obverse of the liberal open personality itself? I want to refer here to the well-known legendary study by Adorno and others, you may have heard about it, on so-called authoritarian personality. The features of authoritarian personality, which Adorno tried to then identify through sociological investigations and so on, are clearly opposed to the standard figure of open democratic personality. Adorno simply thought, what is democratic personality? Open to debate, okay, so the other is dogmatic, tolerant, intolerant, and so on and so on. But I think at some point, liberal critics of Adorno were right when they pointed as to one big hole in the entire book. Adorno doesn't make it clear what is the underlying point of his experiment. His experiment, of course, as expected, demonstrated that many of us are potentially fascists, blah, 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 and so on. The problem, what Adorno didn't want to decide is the simple dilemma. Are we dealing, when we talk about these two types of personality, let's call it authoritarian personality and whatever you want to call the opposite, open democratic personality, are these simply to be opposed as good versus bad, so we simply should fight against one, support the other, or is the bad one the symptom of the good one? So that the solution is not simply fight the bad one for the good one, but determine, analyze how the good one itself, through its inconsistency, generates the bad one. To put it bluntly, how authoritarian personality is the outcome of the very liberal universe. It's typical that Habermas makes this step. And here, I think, he regresses from Adorno, who is more radical. Adorno always had this suspicion that you cannot simply oppose good democratic openness towards the bad totalitarian temptation, that they form a totality. While, again, the whole point of Habermas, he would have said, yes, the persistence of authoritarian personality demonstrates how the democratic process is an unfinished project. We should fight more and more for liberal democracy, tolerance, and so on and so on. But again, I think that the reluctance of Adorno to do this, he did not, that's his greatness, that he did not want to make this step and to say, obviously, if authoritarian personality is bad, then its opposite must be good.